Jasmine Carter had worked in aviation for over a decade. She knew airplanes, regulations, and people. Today, she had a simple plan: fly from New York to Atlanta, enjoy her first-class seat, read a little, and relax before her next meeting. She had bought the ticket weeks ago, paying extra for comfort and quiet. Jasmine had always appreciated the small luxuries she earned through her hard work. She wore a navy blue blazer, her hair neatly pulled back, and carried a leather handbag with her essentials. She walked through the airport with confidence, greeting security politely and checking in at the counter. Everything seemed ordinary dot when she stepped onto the plane. Jasmine felt the familiar hum of engines and the soft murmur of passengers. She carried herself calmly as she made her way to the first-class cabin. As she reached her seat, a flight attendant named Carla noticed her. Carla was in her late 20s, efficient, and clearly experienced. She was used to enforcing rules and maintaining order in the cabin. However, the moment she saw Jasmine, something in her expression changed. It was subtle at first, a pause, a flicker of surprise, and then a hard, judgmental look. "Excuse me, ma'am," Carla said, her voice firm but polite. "This is first class. Do you have a ticket for this section?" Jasmine smiled gently and held up her boarding pass. "Yes, I do." "Seat 3, up." Carla glanced at the ticket, then back at Jasmine, as if she didn't quite believe it. She tilted her head slightly and asked again, "Are you sure this is your seat?" Her tone carried more suspicion than politeness. Jasmine remained calm. "Yes, I bought it myself. This is the correct seat." Carla's expression hardened. She leaned closer, speaking louder. "I'm going to need you to step back. Maybe there was a mistake." Passengers nearby started noticing the tension. A man in 2B looked up from his newspaper. A young woman in 4C frowned. Whispered comments began circulating among the first-class passengers. Some were confused, others uncomfortable. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten slightly, not from fear, but from the unfairness of the situation. She had faced challenges before, but this was unexpected. She stood her ground and spoke softly, yet with authority. "There is no mistake. This is my ticket, and I will remain in my seat." Carla's irritation grew. She gestured for Jasmine to follow her to the back of the plane. "Ma'am, you need to come with me. This is not your seat." Jasmine shook her head calmly. "No, thank you. I will not move. You can check with the airline if you like, but I am staying here." The tension was palpable. Passengers began to whisper more openly now. Some were quietly recording on their phones, sensing that something unusual was happening. Carla's face flushed with frustration. She leaned even closer, her voice now almost a command. "Step back, ma'am. I am asking you to leave." Jasmine knew she had two choices: escalate or calmly assert herself. She took a deep breath, letting her years of experience guide her. With a calm motion, she reached into her handbag and pulled out her FAA director badge. She held it up clearly for Carla and the nearby passengers to see. The cabin went silent. Every passenger's eyes turned toward her. The flight attendant froze, her mouth slightly open. Jasmine spoke, her voice steady and controlled. "I am the director at the Federal Aviation Administration. I oversee safety and compliance. I am in the correct seat, and I expect to be treated with respect." Carla's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but found no words. Other crew members glanced at each other, unsure how to respond. Passengers whispered softly among themselves, some nodding in admiration at Jasmine's calm and confident handling of the situation. For a few moments, it was as if time slowed down. Jasmine stayed composed, not raising her voice, not showing anger. She simply held her badge and maintained eye contact. Carla took a step back, finally realizing the gravity of the moment. She muttered something under her breath and retreated slightly, clearly embarrassed. One passenger, a middle-aged woman sitting in 1D, whispered to the man next to her. "I can't believe she stayed calm. I would have lost it." The man nodded, still watching the scene unfold. "She handled it perfectly." That badge changed everything. Jasmine returned the badge to her bag and sat down in her seat. She buckled her seatbelt and leaned back slightly, letting out a small, controlled sigh. She could feel the eyes of the passengers on her, some impressed, some curious, and some still shocked by what had just happened. She adjusted her tray table and opened the magazine, acting as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, even though she knew it had. Carla, meanwhile, spoke quietly to a fellow flight attendant, her head down. They whispered for a moment, clearly reviewing what had happened and realizing their mistake. Other passengers watched the interaction with a mix of curiosity and relief. The tension that had filled the cabin slowly began to dissipate. Jasmine noticed a young boy staring at her from across the aisle. He looked fascinated. She smiled briefly, and he smiled back shyly. Even in a difficult situation, she found small moments of connection. It reminded her that her calm approach not only resolved the conflict, but also showed others the importance of dignity and patience. The flight continued. Jasmine's presence and calm authority seemed to have a quiet influence on the atmosphere. Passengers spoke more softly, flight attendants moved with more caution, and the cabin felt more respectful. Jasmine reflected on her career and the many times she had encountered challenges. She realized that situations like this tested not just her knowledge, but her composure and ability to lead by example. As the plane climbed higher, Jasmine glanced out the window at the bright blue sky. She felt a sense of satisfaction. The situation had been tense and uncomfortable, but she had handled it well. She had stood firm, proven her authority, and reminded everyone that respect and professionalism were not optional. Passengers began to relax, some whispering compliments to each other about Jasmine's confidence. The middle-aged woman in 1D leaned over and said quietly, "She is amazing. I hope she doesn't have to deal with this often." Jasmine smiled politely, but remained focused. She read a few pages of her magazine, occasionally glancing around to ensure everything was calm. She noticed the flight attendants working efficiently now, avoiding further conflict, and she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. By the time the flight reached cruising altitude, the cabin had settled into a comfortable, calm routine. Jasmine remained in her seat, composed, professional, and dignified. She thought about the importance of standing firm in the face of unfair treatment. She knew that her role as an FAA director gave her authority, but it was her calmness, patience, and ability to handle the situation without anger that truly made the difference. Throughout the flight, passengers continued to watch her with quiet admiration. Some whispered to each other about what they had witnessed, and a few even discreetly recorded short clips on their phones. Jasmine didn't mind. She knew that the story might travel beyond the plane, but her focus was on maintaining professionalism and setting an example for others. As the hours passed, Jasmine reflected on the incident. She thought about how many people face judgment or bias in their daily lives, and how important it is to handle such moments with grace. She realized that her calmness and authority had not only resolved the situation, but it also provided a small lesson in dignity and respect for everyone on the flight. When the first part of the journey came to an end, Jasmine felt a sense of quiet victory. She had navigated a difficult and humiliating situation with composure, turned the tables without confrontation, and reminded everyone around her of the power of calm authority. The flight was far from over, but she knew she had started it on her terms, showing that respect and professionalism could overcome judgment and prejudice. Passengers continued their journey, some talking quietly about the incident, others watching Jasmine with a mix of curiosity and admiration. She remained focused, composed, and ready for whatever the rest of the flight would bring. By handling the situation with calm authority, Jasmine had not only maintained her dignity, but had also created a memorable moment for everyone around her. The first-class cabin, which had begun the flight tense and uneasy, was now a space where respect and professionalism quietly prevailed, all because one woman had chosen to stand firm with confidence and grace. The plane continued its flight toward Atlanta, and the cabin slowly returned to a calm atmosphere. Passengers settled back into their seats, reading magazines, working on laptops, or quietly talking. Yet, the incident with Jasmine Carter remained on everyone's mind. Some passengers whispered to each other, sharing their impressions of her calmness and confidence. Others discreetly recorded small clips on their phones, clearly impressed by the way she had handled the tense situation. Jasmine, however, remained focused on her own space. She pulled out a notebook and began jotting down notes about her upcoming meetings, making sure to stay productive. She had no desire to draw attention to herself, yet she could feel the lingering eyes of those around her. People were curious about her, intrigued by her authority and poise. She reflected on the flight attendant's reaction, understanding that it came from a mix of surprise, embarrassment, and perhaps prejudice. Jasmine did not dwell on anger. She had already handled the situation with professionalism, and she knew that staying calm was the strongest response. A few minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are cruising at 35,000 feet. Thank you for flying with us today. We hope you have a comfortable journey." The familiar tone of the captain's voice brought a sense of normalcy back to the cabin. Jasmine leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief moment to relax, appreciating the quiet hum of the engines and the soft lights of the cabin. Meanwhile, Carla, the flight attendant, had retreated to the galley to speak quietly with the lead flight attendant. They whispered to each other, reviewing the incident and trying to figure out the best way to handle it. Both were clearly embarrassed by their earlier behavior. Carla had never encountered someone like Jasmine, who maintained such calm authority in the face of unfair treatment. The lead attendant suggested apologizing later once the flight had landed, to make sure the situation was properly addressed. Passengers continued to watch the interaction quietly, noticing the subtle shift in Carla's demeanor. She no longer approached Jasmine directly and seemed hesitant to make any further assumptions about her. Jasmine's calm presence had changed the dynamic in the cabin, creating an atmosphere of respect and caution. About halfway through the flight, a passenger sitting near the front spoke softly to the person next to them. "Did you see how calm she was? I don't think I could have stayed that composed if it had been me." The other passenger nodded. "It's impressive. She didn't yell, didn't argue, just handled it with confidence. That badge really made a difference, but so did her calmness." Jasmine overheard parts of the conversation, but did not react. She smiled inwardly, understanding that sometimes actions spoke louder than words. She returned to her notebook, jotting down ideas and reviewing documents for her meetings. She found satisfaction in knowing that her response had not only resolved the conflict, but had also shown others the power of dignity and self-control. As the flight progressed, Jasmine noticed more passengers quietly observing her. Some whispered to each other, expressing admiration and surprise. A few younger passengers seemed inspired by her example, watching her with wide eyes as if learning a lesson in confidence and respect. Jasmine felt a quiet sense of pride. She had always believed in leading by example, and now, even on a simple domestic flight, she had done just that. Several hours later, the captain announced that the plane would begin its descent into Atlanta. The familiar shift in cabin pressure and the slight tilt of the plane reminded everyone that the journey was almost over. Jasmine straightened her blazer, adjusted her hair, and ensured that her belongings were neatly packed. She wanted to leave the flight with the same calm and composed energy she had maintained throughout. Once the plane landed and came to a complete stop at the gate, passengers began gathering their belongings. Some whispered among themselves about what had happened, sharing their impressions of Jasmine's calm authority. A few people quietly approached her, expressing admiration and thanking her for showing such confidence in a difficult situation. Jasmine accepted their words politely, smiling and nodding. She appreciated the acknowledgement, but remained focused on the practical matters ahead. After disembarking, Jasmine noticed airline staff waiting near the jet bridge. A manager had been informed of the incident and wanted to speak with her. Jasmine agreed to meet them, understanding that her input could help prevent similar situations in the future. The manager greeted her warmly, offering a sincere apology for the flight attendant's behavior. "We are very sorry for the way you were treated," the manager said. "This behavior is unacceptable, and we are taking steps to ensure that our staff receives better training on respect and professionalism." Jasmine nodded, appreciating the apology. She explained calmly what had happened, detailing how the situation had escalated and how she had handled it. The manager listened attentively, taking notes and promising that the airline would review its procedures and provide sensitivity and customer service training for all crew members. Jasmine felt satisfied that her actions might lead to meaningful change. Later that evening, Jasmine's story began circulating on social media. Passengers who had witnessed the incident posted videos, sharing the moments when she had calmly displayed her FAA and maintained her composure. The story quickly gained attention, with many people praising her for handling the situation with dignity and strength. Comments poured in, highlighting how important it is to stand firm in the face of unfair treatment and how her calmness had turned a potentially humiliating moment into a lesson for everyone. News outlets soon picked up the story. Headlines appeared online, celebrating Jasmine's professionalism and poise. She received emails and messages from colleagues, friends, and even strangers, all expressing admiration for the way she had conducted herself. Jasmine responded politely, acknowledging their words but emphasizing that the most important lesson was the value of calm authority and respect in any situation. The flight attendant, Carla, faced internal review. The airline conducted interviews and discussions with her, making it clear that such behavior would not be tolerated. She was required to attend additional training sessions on diversity, sensitivity, and customer service. Carla reflected on the incident, realizing how her assumptions and reactions had led to embarrassment and public attention. She learned a difficult but important lesson about treating all passengers with fairness and respect. Jasmine continued her work in aviation, but the incident left a lasting impression on her and those who witnessed it. She realized that standing firm in moments of judgment or bias is not just about asserting authority. It's about demonstrating confidence, patience, and dignity. She hoped that her example would inspire others, both in aviation and beyond, to handle challenges with calm determination. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine noticed that the story continued to circulate. People shared her experience as an example of professionalism and courage. Some airlines even reached out to her for guidance on training staff in handling challenging situations. Jasmine was pleased to see that her actions had sparked a broader conversation about respect, bias, and the importance of maintaining composure under pressure. Through it all, Jasmine reflected on what had happened on that flight. She understood that prejudice and judgment exist in many places, but that responding with calm authority and dignity could transform a difficult situation into a positive and influential moment. She had turned a tense encounter into a lesson for others, proving that respect, professionalism, and confidence could overcome assumptions and bias. As she returned to her busy schedule, Jasmine carried the experience with her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the power of composure and integrity. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she was confident in her ability to handle them with the same grace and authority she had shown that day on the flight. The passengers who had witnessed the incident carried their own impressions as well. They shared the story with friends, family, and colleagues, spreading a message of respect, patience, and professionalism. Jasmine's example left a quiet but lasting impact, reminding everyone that even ordinary moments, like a flight, can become extraordinary lessons in dignity and confidence. By the time Jasmine left the airport and returned home, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had faced an unfair challenge, navigated it with grace, and turned it into an opportunity to show the importance of respect and authority. She had handled a tense situation with professionalism, influenced those around her, and created a story that would inspire others for weeks to come. Even after the flight, Jasmine remained humble about the attention she received. She knew that what mattered most was not fame or recognition, but the example she set for others. By standing firm, staying calm, and asserting her rightful place, she had not only protected herself, but also reminded the world that dignity, patience, and authority are powerful tools in any situation. The incident became a reference point in conversations about professionalism in aviation and beyond. People often spoke about how one woman's calm and confident response had turned a potentially embarrassing moment into a lesson in respect and composure.